Kia ora and welcome to our little Pacific Championship final preview here. New Zealand Kiwis versus Samoa, not including Tonga. And that is because Tonga lost both games in the Pacific Championships this year, which does feel like a bit of a dip for Tonga, and obviously it's quite clear how Samoa has overtaken Tonga this year, but I'm still amazed at how much losing Samoa and Tonga have been doing during the Pacific Championship era. So since the end of the 2022 World Cup, which Samoa did very well in, they lost the final against Australia there 10-30. That was part of a 6-game losing streak before their win against Tonga. Since the World Cup, they are 1-5 in International Rugby League. Not just the Pacific Championships though, because Samoa and Tonga did go to England and play against England. Samoa lost both of those games, and Tonga lost all 3 of their tour games against England in 2023. Samoa went last year in 2024. Tonga, since the World Cup, are 1-7. For anyone interested, New Zealand is 5-3 in this period. They have 2 losses against Australia and the 1-point loss against Tonga in last year's Pacific Championship. So since the 2022 Rugby League World Cup, Samoa and Tonga combined for a 2-13 record. That surprised me. And given how you see a lot of media talk, like obviously Samoa and Tonga fans, they're going to love their team, as they should. They'll be in the nitty gritty. They might not be happy with the coaches and the performances and stuff like that, but these fans just love their team. But a lot of the media hype around Samoa and Tonga does not talk at all about the fact that these are teams who have been losing in the Pacific Championship era, not just in the Pacific Championships, but during the Pacific Championship era, which we are now in our 3rd year of enjoying and having a good old time watching international rugby league in this corner of the world. Once again, Samoa 1-5. They lost 6 games in a row before defeating Tonga to earn their spot in the Pacific Championship final, which they will be very hungry to win. And then a lot of this might look a little bit silly, but you win and you lose, and we just tell the story. Tonga, since the World Cup, they lost 4 in a row, had a win against New Zealand. Now they've lost 2 in a row. I think both of those win and loss records are pretty underwhelming. I don't think they are aligned with the hype that you see about Samoa and Tonga in the media. I don't really see anyone in the media talking about Samoa and Tonga losing games. They don't. The reality of where Samoa and Tonga are at just doesn't seem to be portrayed in the media, and that's all right. But it's just a fact. These teams are losing rugby league games, and it does feel like Tonga has slipped backwards. But the reason I bring all this up is because I was thinking that Tonga has slipped backwards, but they haven't. Because prior to defeating New Zealand last year, they had lost 5 games in a row. So they lost 5 games in a row. They had 1 win, and they have kind of just returned back to their status quo. They haven't necessarily gone backwards. Yes, they made the final of the Pacific Championships last year, but they haven't won many games. They've won 1 game. So I don't know how they can, how this is flipped or anything like that. This just seems to be the norm, the status quo for Tonga. And again, you wouldn't assume that, given how a lot of the media folk talk about Tonga. And Samoa is just as fascinating because There's a lot of hype around the players who want to play for Samoa, and that saw them lose 6 games in a row. Now they have an opportunity to rectify that against the Kiwis in Sydney, and we've got the 2 teams here for the final. Kiwi NRL players in the Samoan team, obviously Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, who played rugby union for East Tamaki, I believe, and we did have news that Josiah Karapani has been selected in the New Zealand Kiwis squad, which is very funky. I'll elaborate on that in a jiffy, but Josiah Karapani, I believe he also played rugby union for East Tamaki. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck played league for Aotearoa College and First 15 before leaving for the Roosters. But I don't know for sure if he played rugby league for Aotearoa Leopards. Josiah Karapani went to Pakuranga College and played rugby league for Aotearoa. So a nice little crossover there, nice little shout out to East Tamaki Rugby Union in Aotearoa. Dean Mariner named at centre Maris Jr., Jazz Tavanga at hooker, Papakura Jr., and fun fact about Jazz Tavanga, he wasn't the starting dummy half against Tonga, but he had no dummy half runs there, and he had 1 dummy half run, according to NRL.com, for 0 meters against the Kiwis in the first game. So not too worried about Jazz Tavanga scooting out a dummy half, but they do have some dummy halves on the bench. Simi Sasangi, edge forward, he is an Alize Jr. Then you get into Chanel Harris-Tavita and Benaiah Iowelu, who could both combine to play dummy half. Harris-Tavita can obviously play in the halves. He can play as a small forward, middle forward as well. He's a Pakuranga, Jaguars Jr., Mount Wellington Jr., also had dabbled in other clubs as well. Benaiah Iowelu, he's from Otara, Howick, Mount Albert, Tangaroa College. A lot of clubs there for Benaiah Iowelu. And we have Ata Mariota on the extended bench, Manurewa Jr. and Ativalu Lasati. Glenora Jr. from West Auckland on the extended bench as well. Again, curious to see how Harris-Tavita and Iowelu combine coming off the bench. You'll probably see maybe some shenanigans there. Iowelu starting, Jazz Tavanga coming off the bench just to play middle forward. Very interested to see what happens there, because once again, Tavanga doesn't offer a dummy half, a running threat, whereas Benaiah Iowelu does, and he was excellent getting out a dummy half against Tonga. But as we saw, now we've seen both teams play against Tonga, it didn't really take much to rip Tonga's middle apart with just quick play of the balls, dummy half running, turning players back through the middle. Boom shakalaka, Tonga's middle has been destroyed. You're making meters, you're scoring tries, and that's how Tonga's 2025 Pacific Championship campaign went. One thing of note to watch out for is how the Kiwis deal with Roger Tuivasa-Sheck at fullback. Tuivasa-Sheck against New Zealand at fullback, he had 23 runs for 9.9 meters per run. Now Tonga, again, one of their issues was just their defensive kick chase and how they presented a defensive line against both teams, the Kiwis and Samoa. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck against Tonga, he had 28 runs for 10.5 meters per run. So Tuivasa-Sheck went from 9.9 meters per run to 10.5 meters per run. He averaged 3.3 post-contact meters per run against New Zealand. Then he averaged 3.5 post-contact meters per run against Tonga. These aren't massive differences. Basically 0.5 meters in both meters per run and post-contact meters per run. Not a huge difference, but it does, like Tuivasa-Sheck, if he's averaging an extra half a meter per run, That's going to be massive because of his footwork, because of how he gets between defenders, quick play the ball, starting your sets, dummy half running on all that stuff. But I do think, if my Aotearoa vitamin memory serves me correctly, that Tuivasa-Sheck, like the Kiwis did present a very good defensive line kick chase against Tuivasa-Sheck, and Tonga did not. So Tuivasa-Sheck didn't quite hit 10 meters per run against the Kiwis. He was over 10 meters per run against Tonga, and that is a key area I expect the Kiwis to target against Samoa as well, is making sure you pin Samoa down their end of the field. Strong kick chase against Tuivasa-Sheck, and then we saw these crazy like defensive sets from the Kiwis against Tonga, where these dudes were just boosting out of the defensive line to smash the Tongans within their own 20-meter line. And if the Kiwis can do that against Samoa, bash them, bully them in those early sets, then you're going to go a long way to winning the territory and dictating that game, which will be crucial because obviously Samoa, you got Brian To'o as well. Dean Mariner's got lively feet. And if those Samoan players, Jerome Luai, Blaise Talangi, Aiowelu, if they're playing on the front foot, that's when you get Samoa looking their best. But I believe the Kiwis have the grit and the mana that we've seen in both games so far to pin Samoa down their end. So I'll be looking for that kick chase. I'll be looking to see how effective Tuivasa-Sheck, then To'o and Taulagi are in starting these sets for Samoa. Swing back around to Karapani, and here's a funky selection for the Kiwis because I was expecting him to opt to play for Samoa this year, because the Kiwis, like, there's Jermaine Sako, Ronaldo Mulitalo, and now we've got Casey McLean on the wing. You've also got Will Warbrick, who I think is a long-term Kiwis winger as well. He must not be available, and Karapani gets the opportunity. Karapani, I personally think he was a better winger for the Broncos this year. Now Karapani is offering wing cover for the Kiwis, and Dean Mariner's playing centre. So maybe Dean Mariner's best position isn't winger. His best position is centre. Who knows? But I just preferred Josiah Karapani, more robust, more footwork, more power for the Broncos this year, and he did a fantastic job fighting his way into that Broncos team. He basically overtook Jesse Arthur's midway through the season, I believe, having struggled to kick on at the Rabbitohs, going to the Broncos, playing a bit of Queensland Cup, and demanding selection. So it's been a fantastic resurgence for Josiah Karapani after he did have a weird exit there at the Rabbitohs. And it's interesting that he's in this Kiwi squad. It does give the Kiwis an indication of where Karapani's eligibility lies now, so we can start to forecast Karapani forward as Kiwis' depth. And I am curious if, because Karapani, his best position is the wing, and then Casey McLean, his best position is probably centre, which leads me to the Shans Nuku-Clockstar at centre role. And I don't want to take observations and insights from the Pacific Championships and apply them to the NRL. I don't really think there is much crossover between the NRL and Pacific Championships. Like, they're different styles of rugby league, different groups of players, and they just deserve to be respected as their separate entities. So I'm not going to tell you that Shans Nuku-Clockstar should be a centre, because he played centre for the Kiwis and he did good. But I can tell you how I felt after watching Shans Nuku-Clockstar play centre. And there was a game, I think it was the Dragons game this year for the Warriors, one game where Nuku-Clockstar did start at centre, and I thought the combination of having Taine Tuapiki at fullback and Nickel Clockstar. So Taintua Piki, he might be like a Pam's version of Keanu Kinney, similar style, just maybe not the brand recognition. So I thought that was good for the Warriors, bit more speed, bit more zip. But I also loved having Nickel Clockstar in the center because he's just a very good center, I reckon. Good defense, good hands, good footwork. Maybe center is his best position. I don't know. But I do remember feeling good, like, oh, that's an interesting development for the Warriors. Or like maybe you can have Nickel Clockstar as a really solid center and then play Tain Tuapiki at fullback. My point is that after I watched that combination play for the Warriors, I was excited about possibly seeing that in the future, and then Nickel Clockstar finished the season at fullback. So we didn't get to see it again for the Warriors, but it was the same feeling after watching the Kiwis beat Tonga, having Nickel Clockstar at fullback, at centre, sorry. His just contact defensively, his feet, his passing, his footy instincts. I like having that at centre, and obviously the ability to have Keanu Kinney at fullback as well. That combined for me to feel good about that combination. So my awareness of how I'm feeling good after a couple of examples of Nickel Clockstar at centre with a lively fullback. And it's just something that I wanted to share. I like Nickel Clockstar at fullback as long as I like Nickel Clockstar at centre as long as the fullback is awesome. Because you do need to be an awesome fullback to be a better fullback than Sean's Nickel Clockstar, because Nickel Clockstar is reliable, he never stops working, and he's just a classy rugby league player. So that's how I felt watching Nickel Clockstar play centre. And New Zealand Kiwis do have a bit of centre depth. They've probably got more centres on the rise than wingers. So if we're thinking about the future, you've got Jermaine Isako, Mulatalo, and Will Warbrick, and Josiah Karapani. Now that's 4 really good wingers in the mix for the Kiwis, assuming no one else pops up. Centres, Matthew Tomoko, maybe Nickel Clockstar now. You've got other guys like Leotawa, Rocco Berry, and Adam Pompey who might be factors moving forward if they can continue to rise. But the best centre combination for New Zealand is obviously having Matthew Tomoko and Casey McLean. So you keep Casey McLean at centre, and then you can tinker with the wingers. 2 players I haven't talked a lot about, I didn't talk a lot about yesterday in our big podcast, Phoenix Crossland and Britain Nikora. Phoenix Crossland has taken over as the starting hooker, so Jeremy Marshall-King got injured against Samoa in the first game, and then he was pretty classy against Tonga as a starting hooker, 74 minutes, and he had 3 dummy half runs for 37 metres, which is 12.3 meters per dummy half run. He gets through all his defensive mahi, but it's the way he controls the ruck in a similar way to Jeremy Marshall-King, where they're not overly fast, they're not overly powerful, but they can kind of similar to Wade Egan or a Blake Brayley, where they can assess what is happening at the ruck, bounce out one way, pass back the other way. They can draw in a couple of defenders, then make a pass. And Phoenix Crossland compared to Benaio Aiwalu, Crossland isn't as fast, he's not as explosive, dynamic, but he controls the ruck and he dictates where the Kiwis are going to play, who they are targeting, and how they work over the defense. So I've really enjoyed watching Phoenix Crossland play for the Kiwis, and I've also enjoyed Britain Nikora returning to the Kiwis because he missed last year's campaign. He's really fast. We saw against Tonga, he got the ball a couple of times, and he could be like a centre or a winger. He has covered centre at various levels before, and if you weren't too clued up on your rugby league, you might look at him and he gets the ball on the edge, and you're thinking this dude's an outside back. Completely different to Isaiah Papali'i. Papali'i is a bit slower, but he's more powerful, he's stronger, obviously because he does the Olympic weightlifting back in the day and all that stuff. But ultimately, you got two really good edge forwards in that Kiwis team who can both play big minutes. Papali'i played 80 minutes versus Tonga, and Nikora played 69. If we go back to the Samoa game, I think they were both 80 minutes. Yes, they were both 80 minutes. And like, they're not churning out huge numbers as far as meters per run, tackle breaks and all that stuff, but they're doing their job, and they're very reliable international rugby league players, which is what you need to win games. Very interesting to me is the offloading stats for the Kiwis as well. Against Samoa, Nikora had 1, Papali'i had 2. Against Tonga, they both had 3 offloads each. But that's not as much as Joseph Tapine. So think of everything that Joseph Tapine has done. I said it yesterday in our big podcast. I think Tapine has been the best player for the Kiwis in at least 3 tests in a row, going back to the loss against Tonga last year, and in 2 very good performances from the Kiwis, including a lot of really good individual mahi. I still think Joseph Tapine has been fantastic. He's doing legendary shit for the Kiwis. But then you got to think, like, also some of that defensive line speed, the mongrel, some of that is led by Fisher Harris. And you do have other players stepping up, playing at a very high level as well. But Tapine has had 9 offloads in 2 games. 4 against Samoa, 5 against Tonga. So he's doing all the running stuff. He's doing all his tackling. He's playing his defensive job, just like Fisher Harris. He's leading the team, but he's also leading the team for offloads, and that is a very useful thing for this Kiwis team, because when you are a fast team like the Kiwis, this version of the Kiwis team is, shifting the footy, getting some offload, moving the defense around, getting it to your fast guys is a useful skill to have. And you think Tapine had 5 offloads against Tonga. Why is that? Well, he's a big dude, he's hard to tackle, and he knows he's an offloading specialist. He knows how to get his body into positions to offload. Keanu Kenny also had 4 offloads though, and Keanu Kenny, ever since he debuted, like, I think he had an offload on his debut. Different style of player to Joseph Tapine. Like, he's not fending someone and then offloading, and he's smaller, so you think, okay, if you get a hold of Keanu Kenny, wrap him up, fold him up, put him down, play the ball down, and win the ruck. But Keanu Kenny's too fast to do that, and that speed helps him create space for the offload as well. He had 4 offloads against Tonga, which was the second highest against Tonga. So Tapine had 4, Tapine had 5, Keanu Kenny had 4, completely different styles of rugby league players, but they can both offload, and nearly every player for the Kiwis had an offload against Tonga. And when you're as fast and powerful and mobile and skillful as this Kiwis team is, offloading is very important. And just on that, like how fast this Kiwis team, I said yesterday in the big podcast that this is my favorite Kiwis team that I've ever seen play rugby league. And it's kind of a bit by accident how we got here, because Jeremy Marshall King, well, he's not a factor in this. Ronaldo Mulitalo, that's the one. He got injured against Samoa. So then you had a spot up for grabs in the back line. Nickel Clockstar moves to centre, McLean moves to wing, Keanu Kenny at fullback. So you got Keanu Kenny into the team. You've also taken out Ronaldo Mulitalo, excellent player. I wouldn't say he's fast for a winger. Very good winger, but he's not fast for a winger. Casey McLean's fast for a winger. So not only have you got faster in in the wing position, but you got faster in the fullback position because you got Keanu Kinney there. But there's also been a few other injuries in the background. So Sebastian Kris, he has had a calf injury. Nelson Asofa-Solomona has had a calf injury as well. So that's how you get like Xavier Willison to stay in the team. And there's a couple of those things that have happened where I don't know if we would have got here if it was just like Stacey Jones selecting his best players, but those injuries have forced some tweaks into the Kiwis team, and now there's no decision about Willison versus Asofa-Solomona. Most of us might prefer Willison, but we don't have to choose because Asofa-Solomona is injured. Okay, do you move Casey McLean to the wing, or do you to bring in Sebastian Kris? And because if Sebastian Kris is healthy and available, that complicates the Nickel Clockstar, Keanu Kinney situation. We don't have to worry because Sebastian Kris has he's battling an injury as well. So it is interesting how those injuries have forced some tweaks and forced selections to one of my favorite Kiwis teams that I've ever watched, and we get to see it play rugby league once again because the same team has been named to play Samoa. My last thing I want to highlight is that Naufahu Whyte has played 60 minutes against Samoa and 55 minutes against Tonga. 60 minutes was the most for all forwards, for all Kiwis forwards against Samoa, aside from the two edge forwards who played 80 minutes each. Fisher Harris 47 minutes, Leota 37 minutes, Tapine 54 minutes. Then you have Naufahu Whyte playing the most minutes of the middle forwards off the bench, playing the most minutes of all middle forwards for the Kiwis against Samoa with 60 minutes. Tonga, Naufahu Whyte played 55 minutes. Again, Isaiah Papali'i, Nikora, Nikora played 69, Papali'i played 80. Zone in on the middle forwards, Fisher Harris 38, Leota 38, Tapine 42, and then White. Those are the only dudes who played over 40 minutes. So we've got two games now where Naufahu Whyte has played the most minutes for the Kiwis middle forwards. And think back to the last year's Pacific Championships where Naufahu Whyte was like Tapine, I think, was the best player for the Kiwis in that whole tournament. I think Tapine is the best player for the Kiwis overall right now. But Naufahu Whyte was tremendous in the 2024 Pacific Championships. He showed that he belonged at the international level, that he is one of the best middle forwards in the world of rugby league. And then he had another awesome year for the Roosters. And he's kicked on to play the most minutes for the middle forwards for Aotearoa in the two games so far. I expect that to be repeated against Samoa, and it does allow like Fisher Harris and Leota to get some fizz up, to get a bit psycho, to get a bit brutal, to play those more enforcer type of roles. Tapine is doing his thing, Aaron Clark's doing his thing, Willison's doing his thing. That's a disgusting forward pack. And the ability to have Clark, Willison, and White coming off your bench, with White playing big minutes and maintaining his efficiency and effectiveness in those big minutes, playing more minutes than Tapine, Fisher Harris, and Leota. It's an interesting development for the Kiwis in 2025 and moving forward. I do want to do another rugby league video maybe on the weekend, touching on some Warriors news and NRL movements, or movements below the NRL level, so stay tuned there, and we will be loving the sunshine here in Aotearoa. Do your best, have a crack, cowabunga, Surf's up, but maybe you're not surfing. You're just riding the wave of life. How about that one for you? Talofa.